before the world told you who to be, before the noise, the race, the endless becoming, there was a quieter voice, your own. This is not a journey of fixing, not a chase for perfection, but a gentle return, a homecoming. Through silence and stillness, through remembering and release, you've arrived here not to find yourself, but to realize you were never truly lost. Welcome to the quiet becoming, a journey through the seasons of your soul. When everything around you goes quiet and you finally hear what hurts, it begins in silence. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that stretches long and wide inside your chest, like a room emptied of all sound. At first, you don't even notice it. You call it tiredness. You call it just one of those weeks. You tell yourself you'll feel better when you get more sleep, when work calms down, when the season changes. But the silence stays. It lingers like fog, heavy, not quite visible, but impossible to ignore. It shows up in your mornings, when you lie in bed for a moment longer than you used to, wondering why the day feels heavier than it should. It slips into your conversations when someone asks how you are and you say, "I'm okay," but the words feel paper thin. It lives in the pauses, between texts left unread, between smiles that don't quite reach your eyes, between all the things you used to care about that now feel so far away. This is the winter of your soul, not the season outside your window, but the one inside your body, inside your breath, inside the space where joy used to echo. Winter doesn't announce itself with noise. It arrives quietly, not to punish, not to destroy, but to reveal, to pull back the layers you've worn too long, to ask questions you've been too busy to answer, to lead you not away from yourself, but toward a part of you you've forgotten how to hold. In the winter of silence, you meet your own stillness. You meet the truth you've buried under distraction, under performance, under strength that no longer feels strong. And it's uncomfortable, painful even, because silence doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't sugarcoat. It simply shows you what is there. And what's there? Tiredness, grief, unprocessed disappointment, loneliness that never had words, dreams you quietly gave up on, questions you never dared to ask out loud. In the noise of summer, you didn't hear them. In the momentum of fall, you outran them. But now the world has gone still, and all that's left is you. You and the weight you've been carrying for longer than you remember. The things you said yes to when you meant no. The roles you played to keep the peace. The pressure to hold it all together, even when you are falling apart inside. You sit with it now, not because you want to, but because you can no longer outrun it. There's nowhere else to go. No one left to impress. No mask left to wear. Only you. And this deep, aching quiet. But here's the truth no one tells you about this season. This silence is sacred. Not because it feels good, but because it's real. Because it strips away everything that isn't true. Because it gives you the gift you've been avoiding all along, the chance to hear yourself. Not the self you perform, not the self you've edited for others, but the self that waits in the cold, in the quiet, in the winter. But silence, it doesn't rush, it doesn't demand, it simply invites you to notice what you've forgotten how to feel, what you've learned to numb, what you told yourself didn't matter, even when it did. And the longer you stay in this winter, the more you begin to see the shape of things. That ache in your chest, it's not random. It's not weakness. It's grief for the person you were never allowed to be, for the tenderness you had to hide, for the moments you swallowed your truth to keep the peace. That weight in your shoulders, it's responsibility you never questioned. It's being strong when no one else knew how to hold space for you. It's years of managing emotions, not just your own, but everyone else's too. That heaviness in your gut, it's all the no-s you wanted to say, but didn't. It's the silence you offered in places where you should have spoken. It's the way your body has carried what your voice couldn't. You begin to realize your body remembers everything you thought you had forgotten. And now, in this stillness, it speaks. Not in words, but in fatigue, in tension. In that quiet tear that escapes when nothing bad has happened, but everything inside, you know something hasn't been right for a long time. This winter isn't about suffering. It's about surfacing. And in that surfacing, there's an old version of you who's been waiting. Not to be fixed, not to be explained, but to be held. The part of you who used to believe, the part who once trusted, the part who felt everything too much and was told to feel less, the part who still aches for softness, even if they no longer know how to ask for it. You meet that part now, in the dark, in the quiet, and for once, you don't turn away. You don't try to cheer them up. You don't say, "It's not that bad." You don't push them toward hope. You just sit, with all the things you never said, with the ache of being human, with the beauty of not needing to be anything else. And in that sitting, something shifts, ever so slightly, like the first crack of light beneath a door, like the sound of your own breath when you finally stop holding it, like a softness that says, you don't have to keep carrying it like this. You don't have to keep pretending you're fine. You don't have to go back to who you were before, because who you're becoming is already here. In the winter of silence, you begin to understand that falling apart is not the end. It's the unmaking that makes way for truth, for something honest, for something alive. And maybe for the first time, you realize you've been so focused on surviving, you forgot how to simply be. Not perform, not push, not achieve. Just be. Still. Here. Present. There is no checklist for this. No way to hurry through it. Only breath. Only noticing. Only the quiet work of returning. Winter doesn't ask for movement. It asks for rest, for presence, for the courage to slow down and feel. So you stop waiting for someone to rescue you from it. You stop asking when it will end. You stop resisting the quiet. And instead, you begin to listen to the aching, to the remembering, to the gentle voice that's been buried beneath all the noise for too long. That voice doesn't yell. It doesn't beg. It doesn't shame. It says, you're still here. And that's enough. You don't have to be light yet. You don't have to be strong yet. You just have to stay with yourself. That is the most sacred thing you can do, and so you stay. Somewhere in the stillness, you begin to notice things you hadn't paid attention to before. The sound of your own breath. The way the light filters through your curtains in the morning. The way your body aches after a long day of pretending. The way your mind races at night, not from stimulation, but from long-held silence finally beginning to speak. Winter slows everything down. It takes away your ability to escape into movement. And when there's nowhere left to run, you begin to see what's always been there, beneath the doing, the fixing, the noise. You begin to see you. Not the polished version, not the curated version, but the soft, unfinished, aching version. The one who still misses things they never got to say. The one who still wonders why it all had to be so heavy. The one who still hopes quietly that someone will come and say, You don't have to carry this alone anymore, but this winter, it doesn't offer rescue. It offers something else, reclamation. Because maybe you were never meant to be saved. Maybe you were meant to return, to remember your own arms were always strong enough to hold you, that your own presence could be the comfort you longed for, that inside the silence, you are never truly alone. You begin to build a new relationship with yourself, not based on productivity, not based on getting better, but based on presence. You stop measuring your worth by how much you can do. You stop seeking permission to feel. You stop apologizing for needing space. Instead, you begin to listen, to feel, to soften. You make tea not to fill time, but to honor a moment. You lie down in the middle of the afternoon, not because you're lazy, but because your soul needs a place to exhale. You write a sentence in your journal that doesn't need to become a story. You breathe deeper than you have in weeks. You stop checking your phone to feel connected, and instead place a hand over your heart and say, I'm here. I'm listening. And though nothing outside has changed, everything inside begins to shift. You're not trying to be happy. You're not rushing to heal. You're not trying to explain your pain away. You are simply letting winter do what winter does best: strip away the excess. Slow down the noise. Hold space for what is essential. And what's essential now? Slowness, honesty, a return to what matters. Your breath, your truth, your softness. The voice within that whispers not what the world demands of you, but what your soul quietly longs for. You begin to trust the rhythm of this season. Its coldness becomes cleansing. Its quietness becomes clarity. Its emptiness becomes possibility. Not the kind of possibility you can plan for, but the kind that begins deep inside, in the still soil of your own being. Because even here, especially here, something is growing. You can't see it yet. You don't need to. All you need to do is stay, to resist the urge to rush toward light, to stop pretending that darkness is a failure, to stop blaming yourself for feeling heavy. Instead, you stay close to your body, to your breath, to the stillness. And in that staying, you begin to remember, winter is not a punishment. It is a preparation, a sacred stripping away. So when spring comes, you'll have room to begin again. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is stay. Not stay in the past, not stay in a relationship, not stay in pain, but stay with yourself. Stay through the discomfort. Stay through the numbness. Stay through the impulse to distract, perform, fix, or flee. Because what if the thing you've been running from is the very thing that's trying to set you free? What if the quiet ache is not something to escape, but something to understand? You begin to realize that you've spent so long searching for peace in other people, in places, in titles, in productivity, in praise, but peace was never out there. Peace was always waiting for you in the one place you rarely visited, your own presence. Not when you're achieving, not when you're performing, but when you're just being, fully, messily, tenderly. In this winter space, you learn to hold that presence like a sacred fire. You stop demanding that your sadness explain itself. You stop demanding that joy arrive instantly. You stop asking yourself to get over it before you've even had time to understand what it truly is. And instead, you begin to ask new questions. What am I grieving that I haven't named? What am I craving that I'm afraid to need? What would it mean to care for myself without condition? You don't always have the answers. Sometimes the questions alone are enough, because they lead you inward toward places long abandoned. toward wounds that weren't dramatic, but were deep, toward moments that seemed small, but were formative. You begin to remember how much of your life has been built on endurance, on holding in tears because they weren't convenient, on silencing truth to protect someone else's comfort, on choosing peace externally, while setting yourself on fire internally. And now, in the quiet, you ask, what if I don't want to survive this way anymore? What if life isn't meant to be this heavy? What if I am allowed to live gently, even if no one else understands? This season teaches you the radical truth. Gentleness is not weakness. It is a decision to honor what is tender inside you, even when the world tells you to harden. You begin to build a new strength, a quiet strength, not the kind that dominates a room, but the kind that lets you lie in bed, hand on your heart, and say, I'm not okay. And that's okay. That's a kind of bravery no one sees. No one praises. But it matters. It matters because for once, you're not abandoning yourself. You're not turning away from what hurts. You're not pretending that pain isn't there. You are meeting yourself fully, and in that meeting, you're creating safety. The kind you never had growing up. The kind no one could give you. The kind that says, this space is yours. Your feelings are safe here. You don't have to hide anymore. That is how healing begins. Not with action, not with certainty, but with presence. With being here when every part of you wants to leave. With staying even when nothing makes sense yet. With listening, not to fix, but to understand. And perhaps for the first time you realize you are not broken. You are becoming. As you begin to stay longer with yourself, a new kind of awareness arrives quietly, gently, like the hush that falls just before snow. It doesn't come with clarity. It comes with softness. With the realization that even though you're still in the middle of the winter, you're no longer afraid of the cold. You've stopped fighting it. You've stopped trying to escape. You've stopped apologizing for being here. Instead, you've surrendered. Not in the sense of giving up, but in the sense of letting go, of the need to be somewhere else, of the urge to rush through this chapter, of the expectation that you need to heal faster. You've begun to trust the timing of your soul. You've begun to feel the beauty in slowness. You've begun to sense something beneath the weight, a quiet pulse, a quiet warmth, a quiet aliveness. And for the first time in a long time, you feel it. Hope. Not the kind you speak aloud. Not the kind that demands results, but the kind that lives deep in the bones. The kind that says, maybe I won't always feel this way. Maybe I don't have to go back to who I was. Maybe something new is quietly forming within me. Hope doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to shine. It only needs to exist, like a single candle in a long, dark room, enough to keep you company, enough to remind you that the dark is not the end. You begin to do small things, not to distract, but to nourish. You clean a small corner of your room. You put on music, not to fill the silence, but to dance with it. You write a letter to your future self and say, I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. You go for a walk, even if the sky is gray, and for a moment, it feels like the air is hugging you. These moments don't erase the pain. They don't fix the grief, but they anchor you. They bring you into the now. They remind you, this life is still happening, and it's still yours. You don't need a breakthrough. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need enough tenderness to treat this moment like it matters. Because it does. This is the moment when something shifts. Not outside, but inside. You're no longer waiting to be rescued. You're no longer running from yourself. You're beginning to trust that this winter isn't the end of your story. It's just the season before becoming. And then something subtle happens. You begin to notice not a dramatic shift, not a sudden joy, but a gentle loosening. The sadness is still there, but it doesn't feel so sharp. The heaviness still lingers, but it doesn't press quite as hard on your chest. It's not because anything outside has changed. It's because you have. You're no longer pushing it all away. You're no longer bracing yourself every morning. You're no longer afraid of the quiet. You've become familiar with it. And in that familiarity, you begin to feel safer inside yourself. There's no longer the urgency to be better. There's no rush to move on. There is only this, a quiet reverence for the person you are right now. Not the version you want to be. Not the version others expect you to be. But the one who stayed. The one who sat in the dark. The one who cried at 2 a.m. and didn't apologize. The one who didn't fix themselves in time for the next event, the next call, the next performance. The one who whispered, "I'm tired," and finally rested. That version of you, the one who allowed the winter to come and didn't try to force the sun to rise too soon, is powerful. And more than that, they are whole. Not because they feel whole, but because they never stopped being whole, even in the breaking. You begin to realize this season was never here to destroy you. It was here to return you to yourself, to the parts you abandoned, to the tenderness you forgot, to the truth that you are worthy of your own presence, even in the dark, especially in the dark, because the dark is where you learn to see. The dark is where you heard the voice beneath all the noise. The dark is where you met your most honest self and didn't run. So when the light begins to return slowly, softly, you don't rush to meet it. You let it come on its own time. Because now, you know, you carry light too. It's not something you have to chase. It's something you remember. And you carry it even in the quiet, even in the stillness, even in the long, slow days of not knowing. You carry it because you've become it. Not because you never broke, but because you broke and stayed. And that is how winter ends. Not with a dramatic thaw, but with one deep breath, one honest moment, one step forward, not out of urgency, but out of reverence. You are still here, and somehow that is enough. Where the frost begins to melt and something inside you begins to return. It doesn't happen all at once. Spring arrives slowly, not as a moment, but as a series of tiny, almost invisible shifts. You don't wake up one day and feel brand new. You don't stretch your arms and say, "I'm healed." It's subtler than that. It's in the way the air feels slightly different, less heavy, less sharp. It's in the way the light rests on your skin, not as something foreign, but as something familiar. Something that whispers, "You know this warmth. You used to belong to it," and just like that, something inside you begins to stir. Not like fireworks, not like a declaration, more like a remembering. A part of you that has been asleep begins to wake up, gently, cautiously, as if testing whether it's safe to rise. And you let it. You don't force it. You don't demand anything from it. You just allow. And in that allowing, something beautiful begins. You start to feel again. Not just the weight, but the wonder. Not just the ache, but the aliveness underneath. After so many months of numbness, even the smallest spark feels miraculous. You notice the green pushing through the earth. You hear bird song and realize you've missed the sound of joy. You catch yourself smiling, not because you have to, but because you want to. And it surprises you, not because it happens, but because you let it happen. You didn't block it. You didn't say, "I don't deserve this." You didn't brace yourself for it to disappear. You simply received it. That is the quiet magic of spring. It teaches you that becoming doesn't require force. It only requires space and softness and the willingness to begin again, not from scratch, but from where you actually are. You begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself that never truly left. The child who believed in wonder. The dreamer who wasn't afraid to hope. The version of you who felt fully before the world told you it was too much. You start to remember. You are always more than what happened to you. You are always more than your silence. You are always more than the story that said, you are not enough, and as you remember, you soften. You don't have to carry it all anymore. You don't have to stay hidden. You don't have to shrink to be safe. The world is still messy. Your story is still complex. But there is room now, not just for pain, but for joy too. And joy doesn't need to be big to be real. Sometimes it's the way sunlight dances on your wall. Sometimes it's the way your coffee smells in the morning. Sometimes it's the way your breath feels like a quiet yes to the life you're slowly choosing again. Spring doesn't promise perfection. It doesn't erase the winter, but it reminds you that no season lasts forever. Not the hard ones, not the hollow ones, not the silent ones. And you are never frozen. You are only waiting for the thaw. But with every beginning, even one wrapped in sunlight, there is fear. Because when you've spent a long time in winter, warmth feels unfamiliar. Hope feels risky. Joy feels like something you shouldn't trust. You flinch at your own laughter. You catch yourself softening, then brace again, just in case it hurts. It's not that you don't want to feel alive again. You do, more than anything. It's hard to believe that life won't turn on you the moment you let it back in. Because before the silence, there was disappointment. Before the stillness, there was loss. And before you learn to stay in your own presence, you learn to expect the absence of others. So now, even as the ice begins to melt, you feel a quiet tension rise in your chest. A question whispered, what if it doesn't last? What if I open up and it goes away again? What if I let myself feel and it breaks me? And those questions are fair. They're not wrong. They're not weak. They're the voice of a heart that remembers being broken and is scared to be broken again. But spring doesn't demand trust. It simply offers an invitation to stay open anyway, to try, even while trembling, even while not knowing how, even while holding the door open just a crack. You don't have to throw yourself into the light. You don't have to bloom overnight. You can begin slowly. A conversation that goes a little deeper. A truth you speak, even if your voice shakes. A morning where you don't numb the moment you wake. A day where you choose kindness, not just for others, but for yourself. You can feel the wind on your face and let it move you. You can cry and call it sacred. You can smile without guilt. You can hope, not because you're certain, but because you're choosing you. You begin to understand, feeling again is not weakness. It is courage. It is reclaiming something that was never meant to be lost. And yes, you're still afraid. Yes, some days you retreat. Yes, the voice of doubt still echoes through the hallway of your mind. But now, there's another voice too. Softer, wiser, new yet ancient. It says, you are allowed to return to yourself. You are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to feel joy, not because life is perfect, but because you are worthy of it, even in your imperfection. That voice doesn't erase fear, but it walks with it. It wraps a warm scarf around your shoulders and says, let's go. One step, then another. You don't have to rush. Just don't disappear again, and so you keep going. One small act of remembering at a time. Not just remembering who you were, but who you are underneath the forgetting. Because the truth is, you are never gone. You are only hidden, covered by protection. Softness wrapped in armor. Light buried beneath layers of survival. And now, the layers are peeling back. The air is softer. The soil is warming. And something deep within you is beginning to rise. Spring doesn't only stir what's inside you. It also calls you outward, not to perform, not to be seen again, but to reconnect gently, honestly, imperfectly with the world around you. And this part of healing feels just as scary, because solitude gave you safety. It gave you space to hear your own voice, to hold your own sadness, to rest in your own arms. Now, to return to others, even slowly, feels like an exposure, like stepping into sunlight after a long time in the dark. You worry, will they understand who I've become? Will I still fit into the spaces I once occupied? What if I'm too different now? Too soft? Too real? These are not questions of ego. They are the quiet fears of a soul that's been reshaped by stillness, a soul that has finally tasted truth and no longer wants to betray it. But here's what spring teaches you. You don't have to go back to the old ways of connecting. You get to do it differently now. You no longer have to entertain people who drain you. You no longer have to laugh at things that hurt. You no longer have to over-explain your healing to be worthy of love. You are allowed to show up as you are. Not perfect, not finished, but whole in the very act of showing up honestly. So you begin small. You meet someone for coffee and talk about real things, not just weather and work. You text a friend, not with a mask of cheerfulness, but with truth. Today was hard, and I just needed to say it out loud. You look into someone's eyes and let them actually see you, the soft you, the quiet you, the becoming you. And when someone holds that version of you with care, you feel it in your chest, a loosening, a return, a yes that feels like home. But even if they don't understand, even if they meet your softness with silence or discomfort, you no longer take it as rejection. You take it as redirection. A signpost that says, not every space is meant for your full self, but you're still allowed to exist fully. You no longer seek to be liked by everyone. You seek to be true to yourself and to find those who recognize that truth and honor it. This is one of the great shifts of healing. You stop chasing belonging and you start building it inside you first. Because now you belong to yourself. You belong to the version of you who held your own hand in the dark, to the version who stayed through winter, to the version who didn't demand perfection to keep loving you. And that version, she, he, they, is the foundation now. So you move through the world differently, not as someone performing, but as someone remembering. And each connection, each honest exchange, feels like another flower blooming, another window opening, another part of you saying, I'm still here. I never left. The most surprising part of spring is not how quickly things grow, but how gently. After months of stillness, even a single green shoot feels like a miracle. Even the sound of birds in the morning feels like music. Even your own breath, slow, steady, present, feels like a kind of prayer. And as life begins to return to the world around you, something else returns too, desire. Not the desperate kind, not the striving, not the grasping, but the quiet, sacred kind, the kind that says, I want to feel again. I want to live gently and deeply. I want to move through this world with honesty and softness. This kind of desire is holy. Because it comes not from fear, not from emptiness, but from a heart that is remembering its own rhythm. It's the desire to dance in your living room again, not because you need to be happy, but because something inside you longs to move. It's the desire to create, not for applause, but for expression. To write something true, to speak something real, to make something messy and beautiful and yours. It's the desire to laugh without guilt, to cry without shame, to be seen without editing yourself first. You begin to crave honesty more than attention. You begin to crave peace more than perfection. You begin to crave slowness, not because you're weak, but because you've learned how sacred it is to feel fully. And in that craving, you begin to reshape your life. You notice what no longer feels like a fit, the conversations that feel shallow, the spaces that ask you to be smaller, the roles you played that no longer reflect who you are becoming. You don't burn everything down. You simply start to step away, quietly, lovingly, with a hand over your heart and a whisper, "This no longer holds me. I no longer belong here." And that is okay. You begin to build again, but not for the world to see. You build for your own soul. You build mornings that feel like mercy. You build evenings that feel like peace. You build days that make room for rest, for creativity, for connection. You build boundaries, not walls, but doors that open only to what nourishes you. And in doing so, you remember, you are not here to be perfect. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to be what others need you to be. You are here to become, fully, freely, and with love. And spring doesn't rush that process. It simply keeps offering warmth, keeps whispering, grow at your own pace. Rest when you need to. Trust that what's meant for you will find you, and you'll be ready to receive it, because the truth is, you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are becoming in the exact way your soul was always meant to. And that is more than enough. At some point, you stop measuring your growth by how happy you feel and start measuring it by how honest you're willing to be. That shift, it's quiet, almost imperceptible, but it changes everything. Because now, instead of asking, "Am I healed yet?" you begin asking, "Am I honoring what's real for me today?" And sometimes what's real is softness. Sometimes it's strength. Sometimes it's grief wrapped in laughter, or joy sitting right beside exhaustion. Spring reminds you that healing isn't linear. It's layered, messy, full of contradictions. And that's okay. Some days you feel like blooming. Others you want to retreat. Some mornings feel light and sacred. Others arrive heavy with no explanation. You learn not to shame yourself for either. Because this is what it means to be human, to carry more than one emotion at a time, to feel hope and hesitation in the same breath, to want connection and solitude all at once. And the more you accept that, the gentler you become, not just with others, but with yourself. You stop needing to be on all the time. You stop performing healing as a constant upward arc. You let yourself just be where you are, as you are. And in that honesty, you begin to feel something deeper than happiness. You begin to feel peace. Peace that comes not from everything being perfect, but from not needing it to be. Peace that says, "I am not my most productive self today, and I am still worthy. I am still feeling tender, and that doesn't mean I've failed. I am changing slowly, and that is more than enough." You begin to realize your softness is not a liability, it's a strength. The world told you to harden, to stay guarded, to be untouchable. But healing taught you to soften, to feel it all, to love without a mask, to stand fully present in your own becoming. It taught you that being tough is not the goal. Being true is. You remember the parts of yourself you once abandoned. The artist, the dreamer, the quiet observer, the child who cried freely, laughed fully, and trusted instinctively, and you bring them home. Not to hide them again, but to let them live, to let them create, to let them speak, to let them dance in the light of a life that no longer demands they disappear. And in this spring of remembering, you don't just remember who you are, you remember why you're here. Not to prove, not to impress, not to fix everything, but to feel, to be present, to live honestly, and maybe, just maybe, to love this version of you as fully as you've loved others before. It's a soft evening, the kind where the light lingers longer than usual, casting golden patterns across the floor, as if time itself has slowed down, just to let you breathe. You sit near a window, tea in hand, and for once, you don't feel the need to solve anything. You're not busy rebuilding. You're not searching for signs. You're not dissecting your feelings. You're just here, and that in itself feels like a breakthrough. Because for so long, you equated healing with doing, with action, with change, with forward motion. But now you understand that healing also looks like this: a quiet room, a breath that doesn't feel strained, a moment of stillness that doesn't feel like emptiness. You're not where you used to be. You're not where you thought you'd be. But you're no longer trying to escape the in-between. You've begun to trust it. Because in this space, the tender in-between of no longer and not yet, you are remembering something more powerful than arrival. You are remembering how to stay. Stay with your joy when it comes. Stay with your sadness when it surfaces. Stay with your hope, even if it flickers like candlelight in a storm. You're no longer chasing light to run from the dark. You've learned that both belong, and you belong to both. And perhaps most importantly, you've stopped waiting for someone else to name your worth. You don't need permission anymore. You don't need approval. You don't need someone to say, yes, you're finally enough, because you feel it, not as a grand realization, but as a gentle knowing, a warmth in your chest, a softness in your shoulders, a deep breath that reaches all the way to your belly. You're still healing. You're still growing. But now, you're not doing it to be someone else. You're doing it to be with yourself, fully, honestly, peacefully. That changes everything. Because now, when you feel joy, you let it in. When you feel pain, you hold it gently. When you feel unsure, you stay anyway. And you begin to trust that even in the uncertainty, even in the slowness, even in the not knowing, you are okay. You are blooming, quietly, delicately, powerfully, not for show, not for validation, but for you. Because you remember now, you are allowed to live softly. You are allowed to live slowly. You are allowed to live truly. And spring doesn't ask for anything more than that. It only asks that you stay open, that you keep choosing warmth, that you let the sun reach your skin again, and when it does, that you don't flinch, that you let it touch you, that you whisper back to it, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm becoming. You are no longer hiding. You are ready to be seen by the world, and most importantly, by yourself. It's not that fear disappears. It's that you show up anyway. Summer doesn't arrive like spring, gentle and whispering. It comes with heat, with light, with fullness. And in that brightness, there is no more hiding. The shadows you once used to feel safe, they're still there. But now, the sun is too strong, the truth too loud, the desire to live, too urgent to ignore. Because now, after walking through silence and stillness, you're ready to speak. You're ready to act, to move, to name what you want, to say what you mean. And yes, you're terrified. Because for so long, you measured your safety by how well you could shrink yourself, by how much you could avoid conflict, by how easily you could become what others needed you to be. But now you know you weren't born to disappear. You were born to take up space, to stand in your truth, to live fully from the inside out. Summer asks more of you, not because you're not enough, but because you finally are ready to live like you are. You begin to step into rooms with your full energy. You speak without rehearsing. You create without apologizing. You move through the world without dimming your joy to make others comfortable. And it's not easy. You still hear the voice that says, "Are you sure? What will they think? Who do you think you are?" But now, you answer back, "I am someone who has spent too long hiding. I am someone who has walked through silence and stayed. I am someone who no longer waits for permission to be myself." You stop editing your boundaries. You stop softening your needs. You stop saying yes to things that drain you, and at first, it feels radical. Because when you've been conditioned to people please, clarity looks like cruelty. But it's not cruelty. It's care. It's choosing honesty over harmony. It's choosing alignment over approval. You are no longer available for what dishonors your truth. You are no longer sacrificing your peace to keep things nice. You are no longer betraying your body just to be polite. This is the summer of showing up, not for a performance, not for applause, but for you. You wake up in the morning and ask, "What does my body need today? What does my soul crave? Where am I abandoning myself?" And you begin to answer, not someday, not later, but now. You drink water. You say no. You turn off your phone. You cancel plans that no longer feel right. You speak when something feels off. You ask for what you need without over-explaining. You no longer require crisis to take care of yourself. You no longer make excuses for needing rest, for craving beauty, for desiring space. You just show up again and again for the version of you who is finally learning to trust her own voice. And the more you do, the louder that voice becomes. The more natural it feels to choose yourself. The less guilty you feel for wanting a life that actually feels good, not just looks good, not just impresses others, but one that honors your nervous system, one that matches your values, one that makes room for your softness, your boundaries, your full expression. This is what summer brings, the courage to live out loud and the grace to let others misunderstand, because they will. Not everyone will celebrate your becoming. Some will miss the version of you who is easier to manage. Some will call your clarity arrogance. Some will say you've changed. And they're right. You have. And that change, it cost you everything. It was born of pain, of silence, of grief. You earned it. So you don't shrink for them anymore. You don't explain your blooming to those still invested in your winter. You just keep going, with sun on your skin, and truth in your voice, and love, deep, quiet, unwavering, in your bones. You are here, fully, finally, and you are not hiding anymore. Showing up for yourself sounds beautiful, and it is, but it's also confronting. Because once you begin to live from your truth, you start to notice how much of your old life wasn't built on truth at all. You start to see the friendships that only worked when you stayed small, the conversations that drained you because you always had to carry the weight of keeping the peace, the habits that numbed you because the alternative, actually feeling, was too overwhelming. At first, this awareness feels like grief, not because you did something wrong, but because you're finally telling yourself the truth. And truth doesn't always arrive with ease. Sometimes it arrives with a sting, a letting go, a mourning of versions of you that did what they had to survive. You begin to say, "Thank you for getting me through, but I don't need to live that way anymore. I'm choosing differently now." Bien McNond, that choice, that shift, ripples through your whole life. You start clearing out the clutter, not just physically, but emotionally. You stop chasing people who left you confused. You stop begging for crumbs of love. You stop performing wholeness when you're still healing. You start creating space. And in that space, you feel something new growing, self-respect. Not the loud kind, not the kind that needs to be declared, but the quiet, steady knowing that says, "I deserve to take care of myself. I deserve to be spoken to with kindness. I deserve a life that aligns with who I really am." So you keep showing up, not just in public, not just on the good days, but in the ordinary, unglamorous moments of your life. When your bed is unmade and your mind is loud. When you're tired, but still choose the nourishing meal. When you're scared, but still say what needs to be said. When you're unsure, but still take the next right step. This is what it looks like to embody your truth, not just as a philosophy, but as a practice. It's the text you don't send, because you know it comes from fear. It's the deep breath you take before answering, instead of reacting. It's the way you speak gently to yourself after you make a mistake, instead of tearing yourself apart. And slowly, this becomes your new normal. Not perfection, not control, but presence. You start asking yourself better questions. What am I avoiding right now? What would love do in this moment? Where am I outsourcing my worth? And then you bring yourself back to your breath, back to your body, back to the version of you who doesn't need to prove anything because she knows who she is. This is the summer of showing up. And showing up doesn't always look brave. Sometimes it looks like crying in the shower. Sometimes it looks like choosing solitude over a party. Sometimes it looks like not answering the phone because you're protecting your peace. But every time you do it, every time you choose you are building trust with yourself. And that trust, that's the foundation. Because when you trust yourself, you stop needing others to understand you before you move forward. You stop waiting for external confirmation. You stop living according to what's comfortable for others. You stop abandoning your truth for the sake of belonging. Instead, you create your own belonging by coming home to your voice, your vision, your values. And yes, some people won't understand. But now you know. You'd rather be misunderstood for being real than accepted for being someone you're not. There comes a moment in this season when you realize nobody is coming to save you. Not because people don't care, but because this part of the journey was never theirs to walk. And surprisingly, this realization doesn't break you. It liberates you, because suddenly you stop waiting. You stop waiting for someone to validate your pain. You stop waiting for the right timing. You stop waiting to be fully healed before you allow yourself to live. You just start living. Messily, boldly, softly. You begin to move from a different place, not from fear of what might go wrong, but from the integrity of who you've become. And integrity is quiet. It doesn't always look successful. It doesn't always lead to applause, but it always leads you home. You start choosing actions that align with your heart, even when no one sees them. You keep promises to yourself. You listen when your body whispers enough. You say no, not with guilt, but with groundedness. You stop pushing to be everywhere. You stop performing wholeness. You start showing up where it matters, and with intention. That's what changes everything. Because you begin to realize, showing up doesn't mean doing more. It means doing what's true consistently, even when no one is watching. It's staying off your phone because your mind needs quiet. It's going for a walk instead of scrolling through comparison. It's writing down the things you're grateful for, even when your heart feels heavy. It's telling yourself, I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be here, and being here, really here, is harder than it sounds. Because presence requires honesty. Presence requires courage. Presence requires you to stop numbing long enough to feel what's real. And some days, what's real is hard. It's the ache of being misunderstood. It's the fatigue of choosing the high road. It's the disappointment of hoping again and not getting the response you wanted. But you stay anyway, because now you're not just surviving. You're building something deeper. You're building a life with texture, with truth, with tenderness. And that life, it begins not when everything is figured out, but when you stop abandoning yourself in the small moments. You brush your hair, and it feels sacred. You clean your space, and it feels like devotion. You cry without needing a reason, and it feels like release. You say, I love you, to yourself, not because you've earned it, but because you exist. And that is reason enough. This is the summer of showing up again and again, not to impress anyone, but to honor the version of you who finally believes she's worthy of being loved. As she is, there is a quiet power in choosing presence over performance. Not just once, but daily, especially on the days it's hardest. You wake up and your mind is already spinning. To-do lists, deadlines, expectations, old voices whispering, don't slow down. You'll fall behind. Push harder. You don't have time to feel, but now you recognize those voices. And more importantly, you don't obey them. You take a breath. You place a hand over your heart. You ask, what's actually needed right now? And often, it's not more effort. It's more care, more honesty, more listening. You begin to make different choices, not to be more efficient, but to be more alive. You pause before reacting. You stop saying yes when you mean maybe. You let yourself rest, not as a reward, but as a rhythm. And with each small act of presence, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Not the old you, not a better version, but the real one. The one who's been waiting underneath all the masks and roles. You don't need to prove anything to her. You just need to come back. Again and again. And you do. In the middle of the day, when everything feels like too much, you step outside. You feel the sun. You whisper, I'm still here. I'm still choosing me. That's enough. And it is. Because now you know. Your worth is not in your output. It's not in your perfection. It's not in how palatable you are to others. Your worth is in your being. And being, really being, requires courage. It means facing discomfort. It means sitting with silence. It means living without the armor of constant productivity. But it also means freedom. Because now you're not driven by guilt. You're not trying to outrun your feelings. You're not performing strength. You're simply present. And presence, when it's real, is the strongest thing in the world. It grounds you. It anchors you. It brings you back to what matters. Not everything, just what's essential. Your breath, your truth, your next kind step toward yourself. This is the summer of showing up. And it's not loud. It's not flashy. It's real. It's the quiet discipline of returning to yourself, day after day, moment after moment, and saying, I will not abandon myself today. I will not forget what I've learned. I will not shrink to make others comfortable. And when you do forget, when you fall back into old patterns, you don't shame yourself anymore. You come back with love, with softness, with grace, because now you know showing up isn't about never falling. It's about rising again and again with more truth each time. You begin to notice something you never used to see. You're not just surviving anymore. You're not just coping. You're living. It doesn't look like a grand breakthrough. It looks like a quiet morning where you choose presence over panic. It looks like saying, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. It looks like letting yourself laugh fully without guilt, without holding back. This is what showing up really is, living from the inside out. No longer bending yourself to fit a mold. No longer apologizing for your softness, your boundaries, your truth. You speak with more clarity now, not because you've memorized the right words, but because your voice is no longer filtered through fear. You say what you need. You name what hurts. You celebrate what feels good, without waiting for someone else to validate it. There's a fire in you, not the kind that burns others, but the kind that warms a room. The kind that says, I'm no longer hiding, I'm no longer dimming, I'm no longer pretending that I'm okay when I'm not, or that I'm not okay when I really am. You begin to trust your joy. You begin to trust your strength. You begin to trust your timing. Not everything needs to happen now. Not everything needs to be resolved. But you're showing up today with what you have as you are. And that is more than enough. You stop chasing a finish line. You start building a rhythm. A life that feels true. Some days that means movement. Some days that means stillness. Some days that means saying yes to something new. Some days that means saying no to what no longer aligns. And all of it is part of the work. Because showing up is not about always getting it right. It's about not abandoning yourself when things go wrong. You miss a workout, you come back with love. You snap at someone, you apologize from your heart. You fall into old habits. You forgive, you learn, you recommit. You don't let a single misstep become a life sentence. You return again and again because you've learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about compassion. It's about truth. And now your truth is this. I'm not here to impress. I'm here to live, honestly, openly, fully. And the more you live that way, the more life opens in return. You start attracting people who match your depth. People who aren't scared of your silence. People who don't need you to pretend. People who say, thank you for being real, instead of, why are you like this? You're building a new world, inside and out. Not perfect, not curated, but honest. And that honesty is sacred. You walk through your day with a quiet knowing. You are showing up, fully, finally, not for anyone else's idea of who you should be, but for the truth of who you are. There's a moment in the journey when you look around and realize you're not waiting for your life to begin anymore. You're in it, right here, right now. And for once, that doesn't scare you. It doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like permission. Permission to live, to feel, to take up space, to make mistakes and still be worthy, to show up imperfectly and still be loved. You've stopped asking life to be perfect. You've stopped trying to control every outcome. Instead, you've started showing up exactly where you are and finding beauty there. You don't need fireworks. You don't need everything to go according to plan. You don't need to be extraordinary to be at peace, because peace doesn't live in the extraordinary. It lives in the ordinary when you are fully there. And now you are fully there, for your morning breath, for the taste of water, for the way the sun finds your face, for the way your heart whispers, "This is real. This is yours." You've stopped outsourcing your life to what ifs and almosts. You've stopped shrinking your light for rooms too dim to hold it. You've stopped editing your soul to make others more comfortable. You no longer fear your own depth. You no longer run from your softness. You no longer silence your intuition. You've come home to your body, to your values, to the version of you who no longer begs for permission because she knows who she is. And in knowing who you are, you realize something powerful. You don't have to chase alignment. You are alignment when you're living in truth. You don't have to earn rest. You are worthy of it by existing. You don't have to fix yourself to deserve love. You already do. You don't have to pretend to be strong, because your strength lives in your honesty, not your control. This is the full bloom of summer, not a manic joy, not a performative high, but a steady, embodied yes to life, a yes to truth, a yes to integrity, a yes to showing up, not because it's easy, but because it's sacred. You no longer ask, "Will they accept me?" You ask, "Do I accept myself?" You no longer wonder, "Am I doing enough?" You ask, "Am I living honestly today?" And that's the shift. That's the turning point. That's the soft revolution within. You're not performing anymore. You're not convincing. You're not waiting. You are here, fully, freely, fiercely. And this presence, this rootedness, this willingness to be seen as you are, this is what it means to show up. You've done it. You are doing it. And you'll keep doing it, not perfectly, but truthfully. And that truth will carry you into every season still to come. You no longer cling. You begin to release gently, honestly, and with love. It begins with a whisper, not a dramatic ending, not a door slamming shut, just a quiet knowing, a shift inside you, soft but certain. You look at something, a relationship, a role, a rhythm, and realize, this no longer feels like home, and maybe it once did. Maybe it held you when nothing else could. Maybe it helped you survive a season where everything else was breaking. But now it's too small, too heavy, too tight around a soul that's begun to stretch and soften and breathe again. And so the season of letting go begins, not with resentment, not with rage, but with reverence. Because you're not just letting go of something outside you, you're letting go of who you were when you needed it. The version of you who tolerated, who twisted, who carried, who dimmed, who clung. You don't shame her. You thank her. Thank you for keeping me safe. Thank you for doing what you had to. Thank you for holding on even when it hurt. But now it's time to put it down. Not because it's bad, not because you're angry, but because you're done. And that kind of clarity is sacred. It's not loud. It doesn't need explanation. It just is. You begin to release gently the conversations that leave you hollow, the spaces that don't see you, the habits that keep you small, the stories you've been telling yourself about who you have to be. And it's not easy. Letting go feels like grief, because it is. It's the grief of the familiar, the grief of who you used to be, The grief of realizing you stayed too long. The grief of walking away, not because it didn't mean something, but because it meant too much for too long. But now you know, holding on is not the same as being loyal. Sometimes holding on is just another way to stay hidden, to avoid the work of expansion, to delay the call of growth. So you choose differently. You choose truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's quiet, even when it's lonely. You walk away from what doesn't feel true without burning it down, without making it wrong. You just honor what's changed and what's no longer aligned. This is the autumn of your soul, the sacred season where you release, not to lose yourself, but to find yourself again. Letting go doesn't always feel empowering. Sometimes it feels like aching. Sometimes it feels like doubt. Sometimes it feels like sitting in your car after saying goodbye and wondering if you made the right choice. Because letting go isn't just release, it's remembering what you carried. It's feeling the weight one last time before you finally set it down. And even when your soul says yes, your body may tremble. Your mind may wander. Your heart may whisper, "Was it really so bad? Could I have stayed just a little longer? Maybe it wasn't that heavy after all." That's grief talking. That's memory softening the edges of your pain. That's the part of you that wants comfort, even if the comfort costs your peace. But now you know the difference. Now you can tell when something is familiar, but no longer right. And so you stay the course. You let the tears come. You let the questions rise. You let the silence hold you, instead of running back to what once held you. Because healing doesn't mean you never miss what you walked away from. It means you don't betray yourself just to keep it. And this time, you don't betray yourself. You choose you, even when it's lonely, even when it's quiet, even when no one applauds you for walking away. Because you've learned, you don't need permission to honor your evolution. You don't need the people who hurt you to understand why you left. You don't need closure from those who never offered clarity. You don't need to explain your growth to those still invested in your old story. You just need to trust the part of you that finally feels free, even in the sadness. Because that sadness, it's not weakness. It's not regression. It's a sign that you cared. It's a sign that you stayed as long as you could. It's a sign that your heart was involved, which means your letting go is real and beautifully human. So you honor the grief. You don't rush it. You don't label it. You just sit with it like the golden leaves that fall, one by one, softly, slowly, and with grace. At some point in this season, you begin to realize letting go isn't just about what you release, it's also about what you reclaim. Because when you stop holding what no longer belongs, your hands are free. Your heart is lighter. Your time returns to you. And slowly, gently, so does your power. Not the power of control, not the power of performance, but the quiet, steady power of self-trust. The kind that whispers, "I did what was right for me, even when it was hard, even when no one else understood." You begin to walk differently now. Not faster, not louder, but more truthfully. You no longer chase closeness. You create it with people who meet you in the middle, not those who ask you to shrink just to stay. You no longer fear silence. You sit inside it, knowing it holds more truth than any noise ever could. You no longer carry the pressure to fix what was never yours to heal. You breathe deeper. You rest more often. You move slower, but with purpose. And in that slowness, you meet something unexpected: self-forgiveness. Because now that you've let go of the external, you start to release what you've held against yourself too. The guilt for staying too long. The shame for not seeing it sooner. the stories you wrote in your head about how strong you should have been. You begin to whisper to the version of you who didn't know better, "You're doing your best. I see you. I forgive you," and forgiveness softens you, not into passivity, but into clarity. You're not hard on yourself anymore, because now you know. Healing was never about getting it perfect. It was about becoming honest. It was about coming home. And coming home means remembering. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to choose peace over proving. You are allowed to release something or someone, even if you once begged for them to stay. You are allowed to be loyal to your soul over your history. And when you finally give yourself that permission, you don't need the world to understand you, because you understand yourself. And that is enough. One quiet afternoon, you feel it. A soft shift. A stillness that doesn't ache. A pause that feels peaceful, not painful. You realize you're not holding your breath anymore. You're not waiting for closure. You're not rehearsing old conversations. You're not secretly hoping they'll return and make it all make sense. You've stopped spinning in the what if. You've stopped bargaining with your worth. You've stopped blaming yourself for choosing love, even when it didn't last. Because now, you're choosing something else. You're choosing you. Fully. Finally. And not as a performance. Not as a declaration. But as a quiet, grounded truth. You walk through the world differently now, not needing to prove your strength, because your strength has become your softness. Not needing to justify your decisions, because your decisions came from deep, lived truth. Not needing to be understood, because understanding yourself is enough. And so you thank the pain, not because it was good, not because you deserved it, but because it showed you what you will no longer accept. You thank the silence because it taught you how to listen. You thank the distance because it brought you back to yourself. You thank the version of you who once clung tightly to what hurt because she loved deeply, and that's never something to shame. And then you thank yourself for staying when it was hard, for walking away when it hurt, for learning to live without what you thought you couldn't, for choosing peace even when chaos was more familiar. Thank you, you whisper, for not abandoning me. It's a moment no one else sees. No one claps. No one knows what it took, but you do. And that's enough. You sit with yourself, not as a problem to solve, but as someone worthy of love and care. You are no longer the person who needed to survive at all costs. You are no longer the person who begged to be chosen. You have chosen yourself, not once, but again and again, in the small, quiet ways that rebuild a life from the inside out. And now, finally, you begin to feel light, not because everything is easy, but because you've stopped carrying what was never yours to hold. Letting go changes shape the longer you walk with it. At first, it felt like absence, like something was missing, like a part of you had gone quiet. But now, it feels like space, like room. Room to breathe, room to feel, room to grow into the version of yourself who no longer has to fight for what should come freely. You begin to look back, not with bitterness, not with blame, but with clarity. And in that clarity, you see the whole picture, the moments you stayed too long, but did so because you hoped. The compromises you made, not from weakness, but from love. The silences you kept, not because you had nothing to say, but because you didn't yet have the tools to say it. And you forgive yourself for all of it, not in a rushed, self-help sort of way, but in the truest way, the kind that says, I see you. I understand why you did what you did, and I release you from needing to carry it any longer. This is not erasure. This is integration. Because you can't let go of something if you pretend it never happened. You let go when you face it, feel it, name it, bless it. You let go when you realize the past is part of your story, but no longer needs to write your present. So you carry the lessons, you carry the strength, you carry the compassion, but you leave behind the guilt, the proving, the old scripts that told you you had to earn your belonging. And as the leaves outside begin to fall, so do your defenses. You no longer need to be guarded. You no longer need to brace for impact. You've weathered the storm, and now you are the calm. And maybe that's the most unexpected part of letting go. The deeper you release what was, the more open you become to what can be. Not from urgency, not from lack, but from a place of fullness. From the kind of readiness that only comes after you've emptied your hands and trusted the letting go. And then, without even trying, you look around and you feel peace. Not because everything is resolved, not because you have all the answers, but because you're no longer resisting what is. The ache has softened. The questions have quieted. The parts of you that once clung so tightly, they've finally loosened. And what's left? You. Just you. Present. Breathing. Alive. You're not performing healing. You're not chasing light. You're simply being, and in that being, you are free. Letting go didn't take everything from you. It returned you to everything you are. Now you walk with more intention. You say less, but every word carries truth. You hold space, not because you're trying to fix others, but because you've learned how to hold yourself. You no longer fear endings. You no longer fear silence. You no longer need closure from every chapter. Because you've realized you are the closure. Your presence is the completion. Your peace is the permission. Your path is no longer defined by where you've been, but by how you choose to walk now. And how you walk now is with grace. You let the leaves fall. You let the seasons turn. You let your story unfold without gripping the pen so tightly. You let life happen, not from passivity, but from partnership. You meet it honestly. You meet it as you are. And when it asks you to let go, you don't resist. You simply breathe and whisper, "Thank you," for what it was, for what it taught me, for what it gave me, and for what it freed me from, and you walk forward. Not because you're running, not because you need to get anywhere, but because now you're ready for what's next, with open hands and an open heart. The kind of heart that knows letting go is not the end of love. It's the beginning of living it honestly. There is nowhere left to run. There is nothing left to prove. There is only the sacred art of returning, fully, gently, and truly to yourself. It doesn't feel like a finish line. There's no parade, no final test, no moment where everything clicks perfectly into place. Homecoming is quieter than that, more tender, more true. It's a sunrise you didn't chase. It's a breath you didn't realize you were holding, finally released. It's the feeling that, for the first time in a long time, you don't need to be anywhere else but here. You've traveled far, through silence, memory, truth, and loss. You've dropped what no longer serves. You've mourned versions of yourself that once felt essential. You've learned to speak in the language of your soul, not your fear. And now, you arrive, not to a place, but to a presence. Your own. It doesn't require perfection. It doesn't demand clarity. It doesn't ask you to be anything more than what you are. It simply whispers, you made it. You remembered. You came home. Home is not a location. It's a way of being. It's the way your breath steadies when you stop performing. It's the way your shoulders drop when you realize there's nothing left to prove. It's the way your inner world softens because you've stopped fighting yourself. You don't need to become someone new. You don't need to chase one more dream. You don't need to unlock the next level of healing. You just need to be here. Here, where your body is not the enemy. Here, where your emotions are not problems to solve. Here, where your past no longer dictates your future. Here, where love feels like safety, because it starts from within. You are no longer afraid of being alone, because alone no longer means abandoned. It means authentic. It means you've learned to sit with yourself, to laugh with yourself, to forgive yourself, until the mirror became a friend, not a threat. This is the beginning of your deepest relationship, the one between you and you. And in that space, you no longer beg for belonging. You embody it. You no longer seek worth outside yourself. You remember it lives in your breath, your bones, your very presence. You are no longer performing life. You are living it, slowly, softly, on your own terms. And that is home. You begin to realize something beautiful. You're not chasing wholeness anymore. You've stopped believing the lie that says, you'll be enough when, you'll be happy after, you'll be lovable if. Now you know you are always whole. You are just carrying too much to feel it. Now that your hands are empty, your heart feels full. And not in the way the world defines it. Not flashy, not perfect, not tidy, but true. Full in the way a quiet room holds you. Full in the way your breath knows how to calm itself. Full in the way your life doesn't have to be loud to feel deeply alive. You've stopped performing purpose. You've started experiencing presence. You don't need every answer. You don't need to explain your evolution. You don't need to be understood by people who only knew the version of you that needed applause. You've outgrown applause. You've outgrown urgency. You've outgrown the need to constantly prove your worth. Now you choose softness, not because you've given up, but because you've finally learned what actually matters. Peace, honesty, slowness, simplicity, not as aesthetics, but as sacred rhythms. You keep your circle small, your heart open, and your days aligned with what your soul actually wants, not what your ego used to chase. You wake up and ask yourself, what would love do today? And you let the answer guide you. Some days it says rest. Some days it says speak. Some days it says walk away. Some days it says stay. But no matter what it says, you listen. Because now you trust yourself. Not as an idea, but as a lived truth. And in that trust, you no longer need to escape. You no longer need the next big thing to feel okay. You no longer need chaos to feel alive. You no longer need permission to live gently. You just do. You let the quiet be your teacher. You let stillness be your sanctuary. You let your own presence be enough, even when no one else is around to witness it. Because you are not here to impress. You are here to be real, to live deeply, to come home to yourself again and again, until home is no longer a destination, but a way of being. Coming home to yourself doesn't mean you love every part. It means you stop trying to exile the parts you don't. The overthinker, the people pleaser, the version of you that still gets scared, still gets triggered, still flinches when the world feels too loud. You used to see these parts as flaws. Now you see them as stories, old ones, true in their time, but no longer the whole truth of who you are. So you gather them, not to fix, but to welcome. You sit with the part of you that always tries to get it right. You place a hand on their shoulder and say, "You don't have to do that anymore. You're safe now. You are loved even when you're messy." You sit with the part that still feels shame, still believes it has to earn rest. And you remind it, you get to rest. Not because you've done enough, but because you are enough. And slowly, something shifts. The noise softens. The judgment dissolves. The pressure eases. You are no longer trying to become someone new. You are integrating all that you are, not as a project, but as a practice. Because wholeness isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. And reality is layered, messy, raw, radiant. You start to live without editing. You say, "I don't know," and it feels honest. You say, "That hurt," and it feels freeing. You say, "I love you," and it feels like truth, not transaction. You're not waiting for everything to be healed before you live. You're living while healing. And in that, you find peace deeper than arrival. You find peace in the becoming. Because now, you understand. You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not the mask you once wore just to survive. You are what remains when you put all that down. And what remains is stunning, unpolished, unfiltered, unfolding. You no longer hide your shadow. You invite it to sit at the table, because it too has wisdom. It too is part of your light. And this radical self-inclusion, this is what makes you whole. Not becoming better, becoming honest. And in that honesty, you are home. There is a gentleness now in how you move through the world. You don't rush anymore. You don't force clarity. You don't grip so tightly to outcomes. You've learned to let things unfold like breath, like seasons, like healing. You trust yourself in a way that isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, like a tree that no longer fears the wind because it has learned its own roots. You wake up in the morning and no longer need to prove something by a.m. You let the light find your face. You make tea slowly. You stretch not to change your body, but to thank it for carrying you this far. And when the hard days come, because they still do, you don't spiral. You don't shame yourself. You simply say, "This is part of it. This too belongs. And I know how to stay, because now you are living your life, not managing it, not performing it, not postponing it. You live it in small, sacred ways, by keeping your phone down and your eyes up, by walking away from what drains you without guilt, by holding someone's hand and knowing you're not afraid of being seen anymore. You're not waiting to arrive at a better version of you. You've realized you are already here. And because of that, you savor. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are present. You taste your food. You enjoy your solitude. You let your laugh be loud. You take up your own space, not as a demand, but as a devotion. This is your life now, soft, whole, yours. And there is no drama to it, no climax, no moment where the music swells. Just this, you, walking your days in truth, and knowing finally that you are not becoming someone new. You are remembering who you've always been. You no longer ask, "When will I be healed?" You no longer whisper, "Am I enough yet?" Instead, you place your hand over your heart and feel the steady rhythm of your own aliveness. And you know, you are not waiting anymore. You are not striving. You are not fixing. You are living. This is the quiet arrival, not at a destination, but at a depth within yourself you once thought unreachable. You've touched it now, not with force, but with presence, not with perfection, but with truth. And the beauty is, you'll touch it again, and again and again. Because coming home isn't something that happens once. It's a rhythm, a practice, a way of being. You'll forget. You'll drift. You'll get caught in the noise of the world. But now you'll know the way back. You'll know how to sit quietly and listen. You'll know how to say no to protect your peace. You'll know how to grieve honestly, to love openly, to rest without guilt. You'll know how to be your own anchor in a world that keeps pulling you out to sea. This is your homecoming, not to the person you were, not even to the person you dreamed you'd become, but to the you who is here right now, breathing, worthy, whole, not because you've earned it, but because you've remembered it. You've walked through silence. You've faced your shadows. You've shed old skins. You've spoken truth. You've softened and stayed. And now you carry the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout. It just is. A quiet knowing, a sacred stillness, a light that doesn't flicker in the wind because it lives deep inside. So when the world feels loud again, and your mind begins to spiral, and the ache of becoming starts to stir once more, remember, you've been here before. You've walked yourself home, and you can do it again. Not because it's easy, not because it's clear, but because it's yours. Because you are yours. And that is the most beautiful thing of all. You don't need to chase the light. You are already made of it. Wherever you go from here, whatever season you step into next, know this. You carry the wisdom of winter, the tenderness of spring, the truth of summer, the courage of autumn, and the stillness of home. You are not becoming someone else. You are returning to who you've always been. And that is more than enough. Thank you for walking this path. Come back to it whenever you forget. The way home lives inside you.